So Lucy, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today about your recent work, about this fantastic book, Cleverlands. It's really phenomenal. I enjoyed reading it so much. Can you tell us a bit about you, first of all, you as a teacher, you as a researcher? Why did you set out to do this?
So I was a teacher for 3 years. When I first left university, I taught science in a secondary school in Feltham, southwest London. And I really enjoyed parts of it. I found it challenging, as all new teachers do. But I became rather interested in policy as I was teaching, particularly because I thought that some of the things that were happening from a policy perspective didn't feel to me to be helping the children that I was teaching. And so I became interested in what other places were doing. Not only for that reason, but also I could see from the PISA results that they were managing to get far more of their children to get those even basic literacy and numeracy skills at school leaving age than we were managing. I wanted to understand what they were doing and how they did it. So I went to do a master's in education policy, read a bit more about these countries, got even more interested, and I just thought, you know what, I want to go and see what this actually looks like in context, because you can read the reports and people have done fantastic work on this already, but it's quite it's all based on the charts and graphs and descriptions of policy as opposed to descriptions of classroom practice or what the teachers think or what do the parents think about this particular angle. So I thought I'd just go and have a look.
Okay, fantastic. So for the benefit of those colleagues who haven't had a chance to look at your book yet, where did you go?
I went to Finland, Canada, Singapore, Japan and Shanghai, China. And the way I managed to do that is just contacting teachers, often out of the blue. So sometimes that was typing into Google, Finnish teacher, English speaking, and emailing the list of people that came up. I contacted friends of friends of aunties of friends. I used couch surfing actually to find teachers that lived in Canada and say, can I come and stay with you and can I come and visit your school and help out? So I did actually teach in all of the schools, at least one, all of the countries at least a few times. And in Finland and China, I taught for 2 or 3 weeks.
And what's really engaging, I think, about the book is that kind of interaction that you have with the teachers and the stories that you tell about their experiences come across as very real and very compelling. Was there anything that really surprised you about what you found out?
I think like anyone, I had certain stereotypes about what countries would be like, and I suppose in a way the surprise was the similarities between some very culturally different countries. So to take Finland and Singapore as examples, the stereotypes would say that Finland is all, children on the floor with crayons, wearing the home clothes or dungarees. Whereas Singapore is all top buttons done up, sitting in rows. I'm deliberately being slightly facetious here, but I actually didn't find that to be the case. I mean, actually, both countries were closer towards the middle of those two extremes than you would expect. And in both places, there was very much an emphasis on whole class teaching. So fairly teacher-led in terms of the teacher having quite a clear idea of what they wanted to get the children to understand and what that would look like. But lots and lots of interaction. So lots of children thinking. And discussing in pairs and then feeding back to the class and then the teacher saying, right, now I want you to say, what did you think about her idea? So I suppose whole teacher-led, whole class discussion, which I wasn't actually expecting to see in either place.
And interesting about the levels of challenge that were offered to the children. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, of course. So I suppose a contrast between what I was used to teaching in a secondary school in London and most of the places, not all, but most of the places I went, was that they didn't put children into different schools or even different classes until they were age 15 or 16. So not only were there no grammar schools, but they were mixed ability classes as well. And that, I think, stems from a different philosophy or a different idea about children's potential, particularly in the East. And this is well documented, actually. relates very much to the concept from Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck around growth mindset. So in Japan, in Singapore, in China, there's an idea that it's not about how clever you are, it's about how much effort you put into it and what the quality of the teaching is like, so that anyone can achieve, and they have quite high expectations for all of the children if you give them the right support. Not explicitly done like that everywhere, so Singapore did put children into different sets at a younger age than that, but Canada, Finland, Shanghai, Japan, New Zealand, another country I also visited, all of them mixed ability classes, which surprised me, actually.
And of course that resonates very much with the work that I've done around Learning Without Limits. And what's interesting when we come to think about the Chartered College is that notion of what it means to be a professional and to engage with those big ideas that actually may run counter to perhaps the way that you were taught yourself at school, in terms of what can we do to learn from the best in order that we can be the best teachers we can be. So from the point of this new organisation, this Chartered College of Teaching, what do you think about the idea? Is this something that England should be doing?
I'm really excited about it, actually. I think that something that all of the countries I went to really did was focus on teacher quality and teacher professionalism, and really thinking of teaching as a profession in the same way that you think about medicine as a profession or law as a profession. And what that means is teachers or professionals sharing a body of knowledge, sharing an understanding that makes them uniquely qualified to do the job that they do. And I think we've lost that in England, actually. I think, for a variety of reasons, deregulation of initial teacher training, deregulation of professional development, I don't think that we have that at the moment. I think, it exists in pockets, and there's lots of fantastic practice going on around the country, but it's not, I suppose, codified. There's not an easy way for a teacher. If I'm a teacher and I want to find out more about a particular thing, there's not an obvious place for me to look. It's quite inaccessible, the knowledge that does exist and the understanding that does exist. So I think it's really exciting what you're doing here, and I can't wait to see how it develops.
So we aim to join it all up, and that idea that we read about in your book of being a professional, sharing your practice, constantly refining what you're doing, not because you're being found out, not because you're being blamed, but because there's a sense of collegiate colleagues wanting to work together to enable the learning experience to be as beneficial as possible. That doesn't feel as isolated as it can feel. I think in many classrooms up and down the country, I think probably in England, it can feel quite lonely, maybe. So would you like to sort of comment on that notion of another way of looking at school improvement, which is more about collegiality than blame?
I mean, the approaches to accountability, I think, although perhaps slightly more political, something has to be said around that, because one of the major differences between the countries that I visited that are doing very well in PISA and our own country and also America is the different approaches to school accountability. So whereas it sometimes feels like in England that there's a blame culture around school improvement, so if you're not improving fast enough that you might lose your job or you might have the school taken over, the approach in all of the places that I went to was much more one of supporting schools to improve. So absolutely they have accountability. This is not about just letting schools flounder and not be striving to improve, but it's about recognising where a school is in trouble or is not doing so well, and thinking what does that school need to get better. And actually sometimes the answer to that is they need more expertise, they need more capacity, they need more support, they need linking up with other professionals, other head teachers who are doing fantastic jobs can come and help them, rather than being replaced or being blamed for that. So I think that does have something to do with why these places have so many great schools.
And of course, if you think about it, and I'm sure you have, but the parallel between that approach at school level and what's going on in the classroom, so the expectation in those classrooms that everybody is capable of doing well, everybody is capable of learning, everybody is capable of being supported to excel, taking that to a system level, expecting that every school can be as good as it can be, rather than the opposite, where I think too often in our country there is a ranking of children in classes, schools, this school's outstanding, oh no it's not anymore, take down your banner, that kind of thing. So for me, it feels very refreshing indeed to think about an accountability structure that is rigorous but is supportive.
Yes, absolutely. And it's about, I think, also about connecting schools together and getting people to work together. And we were talking earlier on today about the example of Canada and how the local authority equivalents, there are superintendents who are often experts, ex-head teachers who've been very successful themselves in turning schools around, and it's their role to come and talk to the less experienced head teachers, to give them advice and support and connect them with others. You know, if they need additional support and they're struggling in a particular area, why don't you go and have a look at this school, you know, in the next district that actually is managing to turn that aspect of school around.
So not the football manager syndrome that we've seen a bit recently. No. Okay, that's really refreshing. You've also recently done some work, I believe, on career paths and career structures. Would you like to tell us a bit about that? That would be really
interesting. Sure. So this is something that's done really quite differently in different countries. One thing that won't surprise you at all, one thing that all of these top performing countries have in common is quite a high bar for the teaching profession. Now, whether that is a high bar on entry or a high bar for what they expect in terms of progression throughout your career differs in different places. So one approach is Finland's approach. So they say that for a primary teacher, for example, you have to study for 5 years and get a master's degree, which includes time in schools. You know, it's not all theoretical, practical as well, before you can be a qualified teacher. So that's one approach. And then Finland don't do that much that is structured around professional development. They certainly offer various courses, and it's up to teachers to go as and when they choose. Another approach is to do what Singapore and China have done, Shanghai in particular, is to say, okay, the initial teacher training might only be a year, as we have with our PGCE, but rather than say, okay, well, that's your teacher training done, now off you go and have a 30, 40-year career, what they do is they say, well, you know, you're a qualified teacher now, you're a junior professional, and you'll have the kind of mentorship from more senior colleagues in your first few years. But then beyond that, they expect you to continue to develop and continue to progress. And that's actually quite structured in the sense that you are assessed on that, not in a scary, we're going to assess you in punitive and we're going to fire you if you don't do well enough. But just, yes, exactly. But just in the sense that we want you to, and as do the teachers, progress. Here's what that looks like, you know, here's the kind of knowledge, this is the kind of skills, this is what we want to see you doing in the classroom. If you're able to do that, we're going to call you a lead teacher and we're going to pay you a bit more, and you might have some more responsibility for supporting more junior colleagues as you move up that career structure. So I think it's quite a clever solution to a problem where you can't necessarily be as selective as you might like to be initially on entry to a profession, to make sure that there's status for those teachers and that it really means something to be a lead teacher or to be a master teacher.
And that's one of the areas that the Chartered College wants to move into, because having a career structure, having opportunities to learn more, have a series of pathways that you might wish to follow so that you can find out more about things that you are doing professionally, and have a kind of a career path ahead of you, I think is something that perhaps we've been lacking for quite a long time. So to build something in like that seems like a good idea.
Absolutely, because I think at the moment there is a career structure available to teachers in England, but it's only leadership and management.
Exactly.
And if that's
Takes
not
you
for you know, that's fantastic, and you know, leadership is tremendously important. But if you don't want to be a leader, if that's not the thing for you, then what options are there in terms of progressing? Are you staying the same for 30 years? I mean, you have to be really, really motivated to continually be developing yourself with no external avenues for pursuing, or no obvious places to look for that new learning.
That's right. And I think also the idea that to be promoted is to be in a leadership role rather than a role that's about teaching and learning is actually quite a kind of false argument, really. We need to be looking at specialist teachers who may also become leaders, because then they will be the best leaders they can be at supporting other colleagues, so the whole thing works together. Well, thank you very, very much for coming and talking to us. We really look forward to working with you in the future. And thank you on behalf of all the teachers who will read this book, because it is amazing.
I hope they like it.
They will. They'll love it.
Oh, thank you.
So
Thanks
much.
very much for having me, Alison.